Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian and we have an exciting video. It is Bourbon Heritage Month. It is September. It is when a lot of allocated products begin to drop. And if you were in the know in regards to Four Roses, at the time of this recording, today, at the time of viewing this, yesterday, you know that the Four Roses lottery was open on whether or not you're gonna be able to get the small batch limited edition 2022. And I failed, and I lost. However, thanks to a kind friend, Steve Berman, we are tonight getting a taste at the brand new 2022 small batch limited edition from Four Roses. You know I'm very big into Four Roses. You've seen the last couple of years that I've talked about here on the channel, as well as a myriad of single barrels. So we're gonna dive in. We're gonna see how this stacks up. We're gonna taste it and maybe do some comparisons with 2018 and 2019. First, let's get to the breakdown of the barrels. This year's bottle is barreled at 109 proof. It includes 14-year OESF, 14-year OESV, 15-year OESK, and 20-year OBSV, maybe some of the same barrels that we saw in that 20-year release earlier this year. So we're gonna go ahead and dive into the nose and the palate on this one. Then we're gonna compare it with a few other years. Typical color that we see here on the LEs, nothing too crazy, nothing too dark, just that nice kind of golden hue to it. And I will say, man, right away on the nose is very enveloping, and for me, very enjoyable. The number one thing that this draws my attention to first is barrel char. I feel like it's got a hefty amount of barrel char. There's a slight, and I mean slight bit of this kind of medicinal touch underneath. There's no Q in here, but I would usually kind of maybe give some of that minty, herbal, medicinal type tone to a Q that's in there, but luckily there's not a lot of that. It's underneath these layers of really sweet honey. There's a good amount of pepper and baking spice on here, but it's that barrel char that kind of cuts through most for me. Right on the edge of smoky, you've got some good oak, not so much leather, a little bit, but mainly these oak notes, and then these slightly charred barrel, maybe like wood chip, like notes that are just really enjoyable, but also prominent. It then waves through and it has this kind of musty perfuminess. It's like a little bit of maybe a rose scented candle, but if you found it in your grandma's kind of musty, perfumey house. So there's a little bit of this kind of musty but floral essence to it, mixed in with these char notes. Beyond that, Tootsie Roll. And I'm not necessarily talking about milk chocolate versus dark chocolate. I'm talking about this candied chocolate note. It moves into vanilla bean, and then this nice, sweet, fresh honey with orange peel. There are a little bit of nods that if you didn't tell me this was Four Roses, that might lean me towards maybe a Dickel product a little bit with that kind of orange essence that's in there. But that barrel char note kind of reminds me of that round of unknown producer 13 and a half or 15-year product, whatever that was going around out there in there, that kind of had that kind of smoky char quality. So if you liked the kind of Doc Swinson stuff, if you liked whatever those barrels were that kind of floated around out there, that ultra aged stuff that came by a couple years ago, but you also are a fan of Four Roses, you're gonna be right at home here. This is a near perfect nose for me. I mean, this has maybe a little bit less complexity than I would ideally look for, but it's got some unique notes on here from some of the other LEs and other Roses products I've tried. Let's go ahead and dive in here on the palate. Man, that palate is electrifying. It's got a lot of K-like spice where it hits these kind of ginger, cinnamon, allspice, clove, pepper, these really crisp spice notes that kind of tingle on the tongue. But aside from that, you get a mature, musty oak mixed with brandy cherry. You get into some darker fruit notes that I think people who enjoyed the Wild Turkey 17-year, that enjoyed the Russell's 13, profiles that are similar, you're gonna find familiar flavors here. Those kind of wine-soaked fruits, the kind of over-exaggerated dark fruit, sour cherry notes, raisin, date, all that soaked in like a slightly burnt toast, orange essence filled, honey kissed, oaky bomb. I don't really think, man, this is interesting. I feel like we've had Rose's products that have had old, worn leather, that kind of like saddle leather or the warm, sweet leather notes. We've definitely had some that have been oaky, warm, inviting wood notes, some kind of fresh wood notes, and some of the youthful oak notes. This one's different. It's mixed with these chocolate notes. It's slightly bitter. It's slightly old oak, tannic notes in there as well. And not entirely displeasing, but it is a little bit drying on the palate. And same can be said for those kind of wine fruit notes as well. They're all sort of drying flavors. The citrus, the innate spice that it has, the kind of saturated, but it's lost its juicy quality fruit notes, and then mix that with a slightly tannic, slightly dry oak. You have a drier profile than maybe you've had in years past. I want to quickly pop over to a couple of these other releases real quick, just so I can get some comparisons. Let's go ahead and start with the 18. And I'm starting with the 18 because at first, some of the sweetness on the nose kind of reminded me of some of the sweetness that I got in the 18. And I feel like that is true to an extent, but the 18 now has maybe a little bit more pie crust. It has a little bit more, maybe that orange essence there as well, but it comes off just slightly younger in profile. This one for me has always been pretty enjoyable, but it is pretty sweet toned, pretty vanilla forward, what I used to call like kind of glazed donut. I don't want to underestimate all the other flavors that are there, or I don't want to downplay all the other flavors there. But it doesn't have a ton of depth, and it does have some good amount of sweetness. Very drinkable, very enjoyable. Let's go ahead and go to the 20, because some of the spice notes reminded me of the 20, but I think the 20 is thinner immediately. Still has some good brown sugar and a ton of really nice layered spice. Let's go ahead and drive it on the palate. 20 is one I shied away from for quite some time, but I come back to it, and it has these really nice, elegant layers of spice. If you want something that's still really rich, really layered, kind of sits on that brown sugar, chewy, toffee, coffee-like notes, the 2020 is still one that I visit back often. And then finally, let's go back to the 2019. 2019 has been one of my favorites in recent years. And it has some mustiness on the nose that kind of draws you in, some of the vanillas, brown sugars, toffee, and some of that citrus as well that we noticed on the 2022. Man, that palate is something else. It's got so much dimension, so much depth. It just lingers forever. Very weighted, very complex, a lot of sweet notes, fruit notes, old oak quirkiness to it. I think if you wanted a pour with a lot of character, the 2019 brings it. And that's why I wanted to have that one last before we go back and revisit, again, the 2022, while that's fresh in mind. Going back and visiting the 2022, red fruits, you don't really find. Fruit in general, you don't particularly find, except for that citrus note. It does have some good vanilla and honey notes there. Those underlying very subtle herbal notes, and that barrel char with a little bit of perfumed quality. Sticks through even now, even 15 minutes in the glass. Let's go ahead and go for that last sip. It's like butter on the palate. But if butter had these kind of darker tones, some of the spice that I mentioned, not a bouquet of complex spice the same way that 20 was, but pepper, clove, allspice, cinnamon. You have a myriad of spices that are noticeable, that are a little bit pointed on the palate, although not necessarily a complex array like you might find in the 20. Those drying dark fruit notes on the palate, as well as that slightly tannic oak and that chocolate finishing. I'll have to say, this is really easy drinking It plays off of a lot of flavors, but for me, it's missing some of the complexity that I would like in a pour. I think that it might be a little less sweet and a little less lasting than the 2021, even though the 2021 had a little bit more of that kind of licorice, herbal note that I generally would shy away from. I feel like it might have a little bit longer sweetness, a little bit longer finish than here in the 2022, because the 2022 is just a little bit too dry and it kind of stops pretty abruptly on the palate. If you are one who likes a little bit more funky, old, antique-y, dry pours with some old oak characteristics and some of those old fruit notes like you might get in Armagnacs, or those kind of older, funkier, slightly earthy and spiced fruit saturated notes that linger dry on the palate, I think you're going to be quite happy with the 2022 Four Roses. If you're looking for that big sweet bomb, if you're looking for that big fruit bomb like you might get in the younger Four Roses single barrels, I don't necessarily know that you're going to find those flavors here. And if you're looking for the depth of flavor that we found in the 2019, I still think that we're going to be a little bit far away. But we have a really sippable bourbon with really strong personality, very specific flavors that hit you without a lot of frills and a lot of searching to notice their flavor. Guys, that's it for what I think is one of the most anticipated bottles for me of the year, and one of the ones that I'm starting off September and the bourbon allocated hunting season with, the 2022 Four Roses LE. Let me know if you've won the lottery down below. Let me know if you're going to be coming to Four Roses to pick up a bottle. Let me know what you thought of this review, if it was helpful for you in figuring out whether you wanted to open it and try it. And if you've tried it, let me know what your thoughts have been down in the comments below. Let me know that you're enjoying the content. Please subscribe, hit that like button. Let me know if there's other things you want to hear me talk about in future videos here on the channel. Until next time, everybody, see you all later.